Grandparents was well blessed in years when they took me to raise, and they had the misfortune of going through the great swine flu epidemic in 1918. My grandfather was stationed at Vancouver, Washington, and when the swine flu first came ashore, it gave you very mild symptoms, very mild. You feel a little rough, but you didn't miss work or anything of this nature. A couple of the bases around the United States also reported in a little swine flu. These soldiers were bound for the trenches of Europe with World War I raging, in which mustard gas, a known mutagen, was released. The mustard gas somehow affected the flu. The flu then turned into what they referred to as the Spanish maiden, a killer flu, a vicious killer. When my father returned to the United States along with the other soldiers, they brought the swine flu with them. And very quickly, my grandparents had just set up housekeeping in a little community of Bradshaw next to Pikeville, Kentucky. The swine flu, when it hit the area, would become devastating. Seeing how my grandfather had already had the flu in its milder form, he was immune. But he was one of the very few people in the entire town who was immune. Very quickly, people started dying from the swine flu. It attacked your lungs viciously. It destroyed the lung tissue. He was digging graves as fast as he could dig graves. Very shortly thereafter, could no longer dig individual graves. So they're now digging graves and burying parts of families in the graves. Then within a day, they were burying entire families in common graves. In the afternoon, the routine was they would hook up a big freight wagon. They got the little bell out of the school bell from the teacher's desk, and they would go through town ringing the bell, calling, "Bring out the dead, bring out the dead." When the swine flu finally burned itself out, we had lost over 20 million people. And as the stories as growing up as a youth, many, many times my grandparents have told me all the numerous stories of the horror that raged. I fell in love with microbiology from a very small youth, because my grandmother especially, kept having the dreams of the great flu, a big plague coming back upon America again. She made me promise to devote myself to microbiology. After I got out of high school, I went into the military, stationed at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, where I studied biological warfare, defense. I would have absolutely nothing to do with offensive biological warfare. After getting out of the military, I would turn to Ohio State University, but also work part-time at the Battelle Institute. Again, biological warfare, defense. Up until then, after getting out of the military, I worked for a short time in the private sector. I was then recruited back by the company many people refer to as the Central Intelligence Agency. 1972, we signed a treaty banning the use of biological warfare agents. So we're supposed to have demolished all our offensive biological weapons at Fort Detrick. We were told by our government that Iran, the Shah of Iran, was getting ready to use biological warfare. So we had to train these students, these people, how to defend against biological warfare. Then something happened right after the Gulf War started. July of '91, a friend of mine, pulmonary expert, called me, and he said, "Larry, we got some crazy patients up here in Mansfield, Ohio, coming into the Mansfield General Hospital. We got some women coming in here. They have got some of the craziest symptoms I've ever seen in my entire life. Could you come up?" We're at an end. "Could you come up and take a look at it? I've sent the blood off to reference laboratories, but this is crazy." Because they were the wives of servicemen. There was a National Guard base at Mansfield, Ohio, which was refuel tankers, which were in the Gulf War. And we have got wives coming in of these people suffering these very crazy diseases. I've never seen anything like it. And he asked me, "What do I need?" Well, I needed about 10 milliliters of blood from each patient. I got the 10 milliliters of blood, went back to the laboratory, spun it down, ran a high-pressure liquid chromatograph. 1988, I had tested a bacteria that was known as Mycoplasma fermentis, later called incognitus. And when you run a HPLC, you get a print, like a fingerprint. I took the blood from the young lady, I run an HPLC on it. I got a print. Fed it to the computer. Within 30 seconds, I got a match. It was Mycoplasma fermentis incognitus, a biological warfare agent. Later, I found out that biological warfare agent had been produced in the United States by Wake and Hunt Laboratories owned by the Hercules Corporations out of California. It was later produced in mass quantities by the Telex Corporation that was down out of Houston, Texas, which was then sold to the Iraqi government, which was then, and during the Gulf War, even though we had totally armed the Iraqi government with biological agents, they had used on our own troops. These biological warfare agents was being brought into the United States in numbers. I started making a lot of phone calls. My section chief started making phone calls. This is the latter part of July of '91. Then we came in on a Friday morning, and the laboratory in which I had worked was deserted, totally stripped and cleaned out. There was no equipment anywhere. They had our personal effects in little plastic bags, garbage bags they hand to us. Here's your severance pay. Goodbye. I returned to Ohio State University and started taking courses in advanced microbiology, which I become friends with a young lady by the name of Miriam Arif, who had a very unusual background. Miriam, I had met earlier when I was with the agency, and she was an Iraqi. Her parents, one of her close relatives, had been the president of Iraq. He was killed in a helicopter crash in 1966, long series of coups, and so Miriam said she thought it was better for her to be in the United States until she could do something that would make her famous back in Iraq. And so, again, we fell into a clique, just become very good friends. We knew each other. Go fast forward to February 1993. At Tech building, there was a little coffee shop, and I down there, and the only person was there was Miriam Arif and myself. Miriam was always well-dressed, clean, very well-groomed. This morning, she looked like she hadn't taken a bath in a week. Her hair was literally a mess. She was sitting there and literally staring into space, almost in dead space. Again, it was a poor joke, but she jumped, literally shook, and turned white as a ghost. She looked away into space for a few minutes, then she very quietly said, "Larry, you're a dear and trusted friend. And when I'm going to tell you, I want you to listen very closely for the next few minutes. Obviously, you do not know the danger this country faces from biological warfare." She then confessed to me that she was heavily involved with Iraqi warfare offense. What had happened during the Gulf War? I asked her, was biological weapons used during the Gulf War? And she said most definitely biological weapons were used. What we did, we used the slow-acting biologicals, Mycoplasma fermentis, which takes several years to kill you. Highly contagious, but that's why the wives of these servicemen we were seeing coming down with it. What they had done, they had sprayed this on our troops. One thing about the Ebola virus, or the plagues that they used, she said we did not use the fast-acting biologicals, anthrax, bubonic plague, because we knew that if we killed a few thousand or 100,000 or so of the coalition forces, you would have responded on us with thermonuclear weapons. So they used the slow-acting biologicals. You may have realized while that war was going on that the Gulf War was going at a fever pitch, and suddenly it stopped, dead in its tracks. Why? Very simply, Saddam Hussein was in the process of releasing their fast-acting biologicals, anthrax and bubonic plague, and they backed off. The United States coalition forces backed off. The reason that Iraq was blasted into rubble prior to them threatening to use their fast-acting biologicals, they did not have any biological materials in the continental United States to use as an offensive weapon against the people. That problem has been solved. Miriam herself said she had made several trips back and forth to the United States. Every time that she came into the United States, she was carrying a serum vial. The vial that I'm holding is actually a plague or anthrax vial. This one, by the way, has only distilled water in it. I asked Miriam, where did you get the plague from to begin with, bubonic plague? She said, that is the great irony. You sold it to Iraq, and the Iraqi ladies are bringing back the very plague vials and anthrax vials that you sold us to use to kill you with. This is the great irony of it, because what you have done, you have literally sold us the rope that we're going to hang you with.